We don't take the coward's way out by inviting people to a Teams meeting or sending a text message or just cutting off their access to their building so that when they show up, they can't get in. Gee, you just found out you've been fired or laid off. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. Really great to be back with you. We've taken a hiatus for, I think, about a week or two. I've had a lot of activities here. We had a really great week last week where in Las Vegas, we had a really good book promotion activity at the Omega Boutique at the Bellagio in Las Vegas on the Strip. They graciously opened up their store. We had some invited guests, and we were able to promote the book. Took a lot of great pictures. You'll soon be seeing that on our website and other social media that we have here on Instagram and Facebook, etc. But that was a lot of fun. Plus, we also had last week was when we had a reunion of a lot of my CIA colleagues from 20, 30, 40 years ago. We gathered together. We've lost a fair amount of CIA friends, colleagues in the last few years, and I had the idea of getting a bunch of us back together. We came here and had a great time, some really great events, and it was a lot of fun. But it was obviously a very busy time and uh, kept me away from doing my normal rhythm of business of podcasting and blogging. But back into it now. I really want to thank all of you for subscribing to this channel. We're seeing uh, really exponential growth in the number of subscribers. So thank you very much, and keep telling your friends and family and coworkers about this podcast. Getting really good feedback from all of you, and every bit of feedback that you give us makes our job easier in the terms of we can hone and really get the podcast to what you want. We've got some really good guests coming up on the horizon, and so I'm looking forward to that. Also, if you haven't done so, there'll be a link here to my Ronin Leadership Thoughts blog on LinkedIn. We have well over 1,700 subscribers to that blog. I try to do that weekly, just my thoughts on leadership. So thank you for that. Appreciate your support on that as well. As you can see behind me, we have this actually came from the event that we did at Omega, the Full Circle mini poster. Loving the reviews that people are sending in about the book. Actually received an email from a good friend today who said that she and her hubby had been on a cruise. She read the book. She can't wait to read the second one that I'm working on, Blood Promise. So really excited about delving into this era of fiction. But I don't want to negate the fact that my first two books, The Art of Ronin Leadership and The Art of Executing Ronin Leadership Strategies, are still out there. For those of you who want to hone your leadership skills and want to kind of figure out what your leadership style is and how to strategize and how to execute on leadership, those two books there are available on Amazon, on our website, mikehowardauthor.com. So hit the subscribe button, the like button. The more you do that, the more the word gets out, and we can continue pumping out, hopefully, content that all of you will enjoy. So for today's podcast, is just me, something that's been on my mind for a little bit. And actually, I write about this in my latest blog on LinkedIn. You'll be able to find it as well. But I thought it was important enough subject that I wanted to talk about it in a podcast. And I think I titled the blog, it's like, real leaders don't hide when there's bad news to be given. And the context of that is pretty simple. Harry Truman had this famous saying, right? The buck stops here. And whether you agree with what Harry Truman did in World War II to end the war by dropping the atom bomb on Japan or not, at the end of the day, it was his decision. Certainly, he had a lot of advisors, people who probably told him yes or no or whatever, but ultimately he realized the decision was on him and him alone. That's why he had that famous sign at his desk at the White House saying the buck stops here. And it's amazing to me that there are a lot of leaders that love to say the buck stops here, right? The buck stops here, except when bad things happen. Then all of a sudden, the buck is nowhere to be found. I think there are less and less leaders like Harry Truman now that actually believe in that particular credo. It's easy to be a leader when everything is going great, everything's hunky dory, and you're executing on whatever your business strategies are. You're pulling in revenue if you're a sales organization or whatever it is. Things are going great. But when things go south, then all of a sudden, these leaders are nowhere to be found, or they're blaming other people for what happened. It wasn't my fault. Joe did it. Sally did. Whatever. Right. The book stops with you when things are great, but when things aren't going great, it doesn't stop with you. And what spurred me to think about this was, the last couple of years, there's been any number of layoffs in various segments of the business community, especially where I come from in the tech world. So in the tech world, there were, the last few years prior to the pandemic, there was ramp up in hiring in the tech industry, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Amazon or what have you. And that's fine. Companies are making money. They want to expand their portfolios, and so they're bringing in more talent and that kind of stuff. But these things are cyclical, as all of us who've been in business understand. It's not always going to be a steady growth thing. We had a few things called the pandemic that hit that really helped, really crippled a lot of businesses, including mega cap companies like Microsoft and Google and the ones I mentioned. And then you come out of that, and then you have the interest rate hikes from the Fed because inflation has gone up. And so again, that also hurts businesses too. Now it looks like things are getting a lot better economically. The economy is doing very well overall. And there are still some fits and spurts, but for the most part, the economy is doing well. Inflation is come down, but unfortunately, in the last few years, companies, large, medium-sized, or small, have had to cut back on their headcount, on their personnel. Usually, the first thing that happens when a company finds itself where they're not meeting their revenue targets, or they just feel like they've expanded so much that they're spending so much, what we call back in the day, OPEX, operational expenses, I should say, which includes infrastructure like buildings, but also includes headcount, the personnel, the salaries, and all the stuff that goes into keeping an employee, benefits and all that, keeping an employee on board. Those tend to be the first to go. In the tech industry, you've seen thousands of people being laid off, or what we call a reduction in force back in my day, where you have to let someone go. Now, when you work in these kind of companies, in most enterprises, you're an at-will employee. Not like the government where you're civil service and, even if you're the worst employee in the whole wide world, they usually can't fire you. At CIA, ironically, we were one of the few government agencies that was an at-will organization. It was just the way it was set up. So we were not civil service. We could be fired at will. Luckily, that didn't happen that much. But when you get into the private enterprise world, that can happen. Every employee, when you sign on, you know it. You hope it doesn't happen. You hope you have your 20-year, 30-year career without a hitch, and then you retire or do whatever you want to do. But like I said, these things are cyclical, and companies find themselves having to cut back on headcount. And what I find really extremely galling to me and upsetting is the method in which so-called leaders nowadays are the methods that they're using to lay people off and to terminate their careers. They're using. I had a good friend of mine who still works in the tech industry, but in the company that he was in, he'd been there for many years. Great employee, continue to get good performance reviews, great performance reviews every year. Got your bonus, got your salary, got your pay increase. Well thought of. Was asked to call in on a group Microsoft Teams meeting, a virtual meeting, where he and the rest of the team were told that they were no longer employed by the company. Now, again, that was to me that was BS. That is a terrible way to let people know that they no longer have jobs. There are worse stories than that. We've heard, just heard in the press where Twitter employees were told sometimes via a text message that they no longer have jobs. Or other parts of the tech industry where people go into work thinking they're going to start another day of whatever they're doing. They have their card key access, they swipe, and it doesn't work because the card access has been turned off and they haven't been told, or they get a phone call or a voice message. I mean, all these things are really, to me, it's a coward's way of letting people know that you no longer have a job. And that, hence, my blog post was about real leaders don't hide. When you talk about the buck stops here. In my day, I had the unfortunate experience of having to let people go. And it's nothing that anybody who's in leadership position ever wants to experience. You're lucky if you are in a leadership position and you never have to do this. I hope you never have to do this, but chances are you might, and you have to be prepared. Back in my day, we were basically told, in the group that I was in, by our ultimate boss, that there were going to be multiple layoffs throughout the company. Our organization, being a cost center, was one of them, and that we had targets to meet, whether it was global security or my peer organizations. We had targets to meet for reductions in force, RIF, as we call it. It could be 2 headcount, it could be 6 headcount. It just depends. I think the bigger the organization, there was more headcount that needed to be eliminated. And certainly, everyone would argue with our boss and say we can't do operations by losing any of these people, blah blah blah. At the end of the day, my boss said to us what I said to my direct reports. This is coming on from the CEO and the C-suite, the ultimate decision makers. So we don't have a choice. We have to make these cuts. And so then comes the hard task of me going back to my leadership team. Now, mind you, by the time this particular iteration of layoffs was looming, organizations like mine, as well as my peer organizations, we'd already gone through our building our staff, building our strategies, building our programs, and really at some point weeding out the malcontents, the people that didn't have the desire to go where we were going, or the people that simply couldn't do the job. At the time that we were told we needed to lay off a number of people, everyone in my organization were really, really good people, great employees, contributed a lot to global security, contributed a lot to Microsoft, and really did a great job, which makes the job even more harder when you have to let people go, because you're now cutting into the meat, right? You're cutting into really good people who are managing really successful programs. And again, meeting with my leadership team, was the same conversation with me that my peers and I had with our boss. But we had to make the decision. And that we spent a long time, obviously, with a lot of help from HR, our HR counterparts who were assigned to each of our groups, to work through who we were going to lay off. And I would listen to arguments. It was almost like I've talked about this before, during promotion cycle, when you only have X number of money and resources for promotions. So you argue it out amongst the leadership team. They advocate for their people, who should be this kind of staff rank, and we work it through until we have that staff rank. Well, it's the same process, but unfortunately, we're talking about letting people go. And I let my people say their piece as to why Johnny should stay because this is what they do and this is how critical are they to my leadership team's organization, or why Sally should stay. We talk it through, walk it through. Ultimately, like Harry Truman says, the buck stops here. It stops with me. I have to decide if I needed, if there were two head count or three head count, whatever it was. I had to decide which three bodies from my organization were going to be on there. And you have to use whatever criteria you work with HR to get it done. I'm not going into that. That's kind of a whole different podcast on its own. But needless to say, we made the decision. Not everybody likes the decision. Obviously, if I'm taking somebody away from one of my direct reports organizations, they're not going to like it. Well, why didn't you take it from so and so? Why did it come on to me? Well, it's my decision. I have to look at what I think is best for the long-term trajectory of our organization, and that's one of the criteria I use. But I make a decision, and then what happens is you work with your HR counterpart. You set up a meeting with the affected people one at a time. They usually meet in a place away from their workplace. They're just told, hey, need to meet you at this building, this office. And they come in and you're there with HR, and I have the unenviable job of letting them know that they're no longer employed. But you want to do it with humanity, with compassion, with sympathy, knowing that person came into work today thinking that they've got, a whole career trajectory in front of them, and they're being told now that that's ended. And it's a shock. It's a shock to them, and of course, for you as a leader, you get a knot in the pit of your stomach because people you're looking at aren't commodities. They're not numbers the way some Beantown or CFO people think. These are real people with families, children, and bills to pay. They may have health needs, so they need medical benefits. And all these things are swirling in their heads. Your job is to be as compassionate and human as possible. And then HR is there obviously to give them a package which tells them what their benefits are for a while. Do they have health benefits for a while, or how to apply for COBRA, or here's some resources that we can help you to look for other jobs even within the company, where they may still be hiring or outsourced headhunter kind of things. But all that's immaterial at this point. It's a swirl. It's a fog for these employees. It's hard. It's hard for me as a leader, but you have to do that. We don't take the coward's way out by inviting people to a Teams meeting or sending a text message or just cutting off their access to their building so that when they show up, they can't get in. Gee, you just found out you've been fired or laid off. That's the coward's way out. And you're seeing more and more of that, especially in the tech industry, but I suspect in other places too. That's not leadership. If you say the buck stops here, then the buck stops here. And you can't just be a leader when everything's great. You have to be a leader when things are not so great. This is one of the most unpleasant things that any leader has to do. And it's going on right now. Now, you as a leader may be in a company where you have no choice. They don't give you the option of meeting with your employee face to face. You're being told, usually by cowards up above, that this is the way we're going to do it. Because they don't want to have to deal with it, right? So this is the easy way out. But if you have a choice, you need to make sure that you are doing the right thing and doing it in person, because that's the right thing to do. Otherwise, all this talk that companies do, they talk about, well, people are our number one asset. We value our employees. They're like family, and they contribute so much, and we really blah 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 blah, right? And yet they say this, but then they're let go in the most impersonal way possible. That does a couple of things. First of all, person being let go certainly doesn't have a great feeling about the company. And we'll certainly say that to anybody that they have a chance to talk to. For the people left behind who haven't been laid off, do you think it makes them more loyal to the company? No, I think it makes them paranoid, thinking they might be next. And a bit of cynicism. the next time the CEO or some bigwig in the company says, people, you people are our best commodity, you're our best asset, we value you, right? No, no. Morale will take a hit in those companies if you don't handle it the right way. And it's amazing to me, all these smart people in the C-suites that can think of all these wonderful business strategies and drive new innovations and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the human factor of telling somebody that they no longer have employment in your company, and you've told them all these years how valuable they are to you, and you let them go via a video call or text message. Well, that doesn't quite equate. So again, it's maybe out of your control. You may have a company that has a bunch of cowards leading the company that don't have the guts to actually have themselves or their leaders talk face to face with people that they're letting go because of cutbacks. And it's unfortunate if you work for a company like that. And I see more and more companies sort of leaning that way, and that's not right. And if you're a CEO and you say those kind of things about how wonderful everybody is, how we value everybody, and then you're letting people go in the most impersonal way possible, your credibility takes a shot too. So remember, when you say it, if you say the buck stops with you, and if you believe that mantra, then you're going to have to live it in the good times and also in the bad times. Again, I wish this on nobody. I hope, I hope that you as a leader never have to go through this, that for some reason your company may lay off people, but it's not in your area, or you never have to experience this. But if you do, and none of us ever anticipate having to do this, if you do, just remember, again, that things are in your control. If and when you have to do this, you do it face to face. You provide as much compassion and humanity and sympathy as you can, while understanding you still have a job to do. As unenviable as it is, you still have a job to do as a leader of an organization in that particular company. You work with your HR counterpart to make sure that you're both talking in the same way. That's the other thing. If you're having to be in a situation like that and you're showing compassion, but the HR person is an automaton, they're just going through the package that they're giving them without any semblance of sympathy, that's not going to work either. So you and the HR person need to be on the same page, right? You have to do most of the heavy lifting. Your employees, so you're the one that does the actual letting go. But that HR person, the tone, and how they approach that person needs to be just like yours, so that you're speaking on behalf of the company in a way that hopefully lets people down as gently as you possibly can. There, the reactions I've seen are people have been stunned, people have cried. I haven't really seen anybody get angry, but obviously they're in shock. You know, what are they going to tell their wives or their husbands, or their children when they get home? What does tomorrow look like? What does the next week or so look like? Where am I going to get another job? How do I go get another job? And so all these kinds of things come into play. So how you approach it, how you talk to them, and let them know that while they no longer work for you, they can always pick up a phone and call. And if they just want to unload or just talk about something, or if you're able to think of places where their talents might lend themselves to either another company or another part of the organization, you certainly have the ability to help them out that way. But in this particular conversation, your job is to let them go. But don't hide behind the trappings of leadership and technology, and let them go in a way that is that you would not want to be let go. And that's what I don't understand about a lot of these companies nowadays. That, or again, I use this word a lot in this podcast because I truly believe they're cowards. They're taking the easy way out. So they made the decision. high up to let people go. Great. Then empower, in fact, mandate that your leaders meet with these folks face to face. Do not give them, you C-suite, you CEO, CFO, COO, legal. Do not give your leaders the option of letting people go electronically or by text or what have you. You make them do it face to face, because as hard as it is, that also builds great leadership, because it forces leaders to confront an employee in a bad situation and figure out in the most humane way possible how to let them go. So remember that. Like I said, I've got a blog post that's out there now. You can read about it. It gets a little bit more in depth into what I'm talking about. But it just kind of hit me the last couple of weeks. It just, I'm hearing stories, horror stories from, personal friends of mine, and then reading about multiple layoffs done in the most impersonal way, just kind of set me off. So I thought I would just talk about it. And so I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear if you've been either on the leadership side of it, having to let people go, or if you've been let go yourself, how you felt about it. How were you treated? Were you treated humanely, or were you treated just like as a number? And I think it'd be important to have this dialogue and keep this dialogue going. So that's all I have for right now. Again, this is really good food for thought. Again, I hope nothing like this ever happens to you as leaders. The buck stops with you. If you truly say it, you got to live it. So we're going to do another podcast sometime soon, another edition of the Rona Leadership Podcast. Again, please pick up a copy of Full Circle. It's on Amazon, and it was a bestseller in 7 different countries in a lot of different categories, as well as my first 2 books, The Art of Rona Leadership and The Art of Executing Rona Leadership Strategies. I'm hard at work on a book called Blood Promise, which is a sequel to Full Circle. I'm almost done with that, and then we'll get that out soon. So keep your comments coming. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. And until next time, we'll see you on another edition of the Rona Leadership Podcast.